What up, Raffleitos? Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to address a question that I raised a year ago. Exactly a year ago I asked the question, how rich is Guyana? And I answered it in a video, which I will show the link to that video here. But it's a year later and it's time for us to address that question. 6 months after that video, in September, I raised the question, what will happen to the Guyana dollar? In other words, I proposed that the value of the Guyana dollar will rise after March 1st, 2020. I'll put a link to that video here. And so this video is a follow-up to those two videos against the backdrop of a 13th discovery of oil by ExxonMobil. Right? Back in April last year, Exxon probably had about 5 oil wells. A year later, there are 13 oil wells. 13. So let's find out how that will impact the Guyanese economy and the value of the Guyana dollar. Stay tuned.
Oh, this is my day. I'm ready to take it on, come what may.
Before I get started, there is a sidebar issue that I need to address, and that involves who owns interest in Guyana's oil exploration. And this actually involves China. So recently I did another video called China's Global Impact on Guyana. And I'm going to put another link to that video here. So this involves China because China owns 25% of the oil exploration interest in the Stabroek block where the 13th oil well was discovered this week. Now let that sink in. China's company, that is CNOOC, the China National Offshore Oil Company Limited, owns a 25% stake in the Stabroek block that covers about 26,000 square kilometers. The remaining 75% is owned by the USA, that is Exxon's, Esso, and Hess. So those are the facts concerning this discovery. Now, just before that discovery, at the 12th discovery, Exxon had raised its estimates for Guyana's oil reserves to 5.5 billion barrel equivalents. And now you can imagine that with the 13th discovery, Guyana's oil reserves must be north of 5.5 billion barrel equivalents of oil. And so the question is, what impact will this have on Guyana's GDP? In other words, a year ago, when I projected that Guyana's economy will grow to become greater than the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, that is the largest economy in the Caribbean, we didn't have 5.5 billion barrel equivalents. And more recently than that, I pointed out that 5.5 billion barrel equivalents is equivalent to about 15 years of oil produced at 1 million barrels per day. Now we know now that Exxon will start production at 120,000 barrels per day in March 2020. And that by 2025, they plan to increase production to 750,000 barrels per day. We know that at the end of this year, in the fourth quarter, or by the third quarter of this year, the Liza Destiny, the FPSO, the floating platform and offloading ship, will be in place to start production. For those of you who are still skeptical that Guyana has oil, things are going to start to happen by the third or the fourth quarter this year. So these are the facts, right? Those are the sidebar issues. The two questions I want to answer are, how now do we assess the growth of the Guyanese economy, and how now will this impact the value of the Guyana dollar? So here are the answers to those two questions. First, 2 years ago, that is, a year ago, 2 years out from first oil, that is 2 years ahead of first oil, I predicted that the Guyanese economy will double for 3 consecutive years after first oil. Now we're closer to first oil and we have a much tighter focus on the target price, on the price of oil and on the volume of production, we can make a much more accurate prediction. Now I'm predicting that the economy will grow by about 25% in 2020, and then about 50%, and then begin to double after that. In other words, there's going to be a ramp. It's not going to immediately double, but it does not change my prediction that in 10 years, the value of the Guyanese economy, that is the GDP, will be approaching somewhere between 20 and 30 billion dollars, perhaps north of 30 billion dollars if the price of oil remains high. So our prediction is based on the projected price of oil being above $70 a barrel, which is what we said the estimates were from those who studied oil futures. So the price of oil, the average price of oil going forward after 2020 is expected to be north of $70 a barrel, and that means we are above the price, the profit price, the price at which Guyana needs to produce oil to make a profit, that is $46 a barrel. So my closer estimate on closer inspection is that the GDP, which was 3.67 billion US dollars back in 2017, was $3.77 billion in 2018, a growth of 3.4%, and that in 2019 it will probably be another 3 to 4%, but in 2020 and beyond it's going to be above 25%. That prediction I now make. So my prediction on the value of the Guyana dollar will rise stands, but specifically now that we are a year closer to 2020 when first oil will be produced, I think that even though the government plans to hold the value of the Guyana dollar fixed by simply banking the US dollars that we will earn from oil, in other words, withholding the release of large amounts of foreign currency on the Guyanese economy, which is intended to suppress the value of the Guyana dollar, I don't think that will work. I think that eventually, perhaps slower than I predicted before, perhaps we will get to one-to-one equivalence with the US dollar, maybe in 10 years, but you cannot suppress the value of the Guyana dollar because of the economic growth, because of the surplus of dollars in the economy, because the demand for dollars will be less than the supply of dollars. That will force the value of the dollar to rise. So if you are a currency trader, the Guyana dollar would be the first bet for making a profit in the currency markets over the next 5 years. That prediction stands. Now, of course, there are lots of people who can see all of the uncertainties that are attendant with the oil industry. One of them is the electric car. So there are those people who are arguing that the adoption of electric vehicles will suppress the price of oil because it will decrease demand. Let me make this clear. Even in the US, the country that has the largest number of cars, oil used by cars accounts for only 15% of the demand. 15% of the oil in the US is used by cars. And cars, as a percentage of oil use around the world, accounts for 5% or less. So even if you replace all the cars in the world with electric vehicles, that will only replace 5% of the demand for oil. So cars are not going to suppress the value, the price of oil, at least not in the near term. Okay, those are the facts, guys. Tell me what you think about this situation where Guyana is now closer to production, where evidence of the magnitude of Guyana's oil reserves is becoming clearer every day, and where the value of the Guyana dollar will definitely rise in response to all of these forward-looking events. In the comments below, tell me what you think about the Guyanese economy, the prospects of the Guyanese economy in the next decade, and what you think about the value of the Guyana dollar as a result of the oil industry. And remember, you can support the channel on Patreon and on PayPal, and share this video with friends and family around the world. And of course, there's now merchandise you can purchase. Later!